Welcome to the Menopause Unplugged Podcast with me, your host, Nikki Oliveira. On this podcast, we will hear from women who are navigating the challenging and transformative journey of perimenopause and menopause. These women have graciously agreed to share their stories and insights, offering a raw and honest glimpse into what it's like to go through this major life transition. From hot flushes to rediscovering themselves, our guests will provide a wealth of knowledge and inspiration for anyone who's going through or will go through menopause. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and join us for a fascinating and enlightening discussion. Welcome to the Menopause Unplugged podcast with me, your host, Nikki Oliveira. Today in the studio, I've got with me Claire. How you doing, Claire? Okay?
I'm very well, thank you, Nikki. Thank you for having me on today.
Great. So Claire, how did you first notice that you were experiencing the menopause?
I'm pretty rare. I'm unlike a lot of women. I've never had a hot flush. I woke up probably 14 years ago now, rolled onto my little finger, and wedding ring finger, and staggered into the bathroom, thinking, "Oh my goodness, what have I done? I've rolled onto my fingers in the middle of the night."
Right.
Kind of ran them under the tap. And for me, that was the beginning of 10 years of menopause, joint hell, leaving me unable to stand, sit and walk.
Wow. So of course joint pain is the most severe symptom then I take it that you've experienced. Did you experience anything else other than joint pain?
Yes, no, I think that for me kind of led on to very quickly. It went from my hands into my elbows, into my knees and hips, leaving me unable to stand, sit and walk.
Yeah.
It was a very long 10 years of being under 11 consultants, being backwards and forwards to the doctors. I kind of remember my GP saying, we've seen you twice in about 20 years and kind of now you've got your own car parking space outside.
Yeah.
And I was under fibromyalgia, Lyme's disease, arthritis, to name but a few.
Mm-hmm.
And in between that time, I didn't realise for 2 years I didn't sleep at all, not once, one night, unless I stood up and slept against a door frame. Unbeknown to me, I thought it was very mild asthma, but I was having panic and anxiety attacks every night. I think that definitely led to me being in a really dark place. I have been, at the top of the car park looking down thinking, well, I don't feel depressed, but I don't enjoy any aspect of my life. I think it was a very lonely time. I'd have only been sort of late 30s, early 40s when my menopause hell began. And sadly, our GPs aren't educated, they're not informed. So I was really just passed from pillar to post and, massive advocate of the NHS, but you wait a long time from sensory nerve testing to go for an MRI on your back or your neck or your elbows or knees or hips. So yeah, I would say joint pain has been without a doubt my worst. Anxiety, I've definitely been in a really dark place. I think I've bordered that depression. Definitely for me, exercise has kept me going, even if the lads at the gym have dragged me up there, and I haven't been able to walk up the stairs. I think it's great for your mental health. So yeah, I've definitely suffered with insomnia. That is the worst torture, not being able to sleep.
Yeah, I think insomnia indeed is quite a common symptom, but one that's not really spoken about, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think often that we find it in the menopause space I'm in, you find that often the symptoms that come along are the mental health ones, are the mental ones and not the physical ones. So I think the anxiety, I remember even a few years before this, driving to the theatre with some friends and having to stop on a major motorway and get out and walk around the car. And I was sort of banging my chest. And it's only in hindsight, and you look back 15 years on thinking, oh my goodness, I remember, I was obviously having panic attacks back then. And,
Yeah.
I've always been a very outgoing, bubbly, bright person. And I turned into someone that I didn't even really know myself anymore.
Yeah. Was
Very,
that
very lonely journey as well. I think I'm a single mum. So, the girls, I leaned on the twins very heavily. They would have to come back from college to help me get off the toilet. I had the radiator off the wall, the glass shower screen off the wall. when you're kind of, dreading getting out of bed, that's if you can get out of bed, and then picking your toothbrush up in the morning, your electric one, and putting it on with your nose. And, you kind of adapt. But then I stopped leaving the house because I couldn't get out of the car the other side. To push the keep pushing the clutch in was absolutely agony for me. I remember
Yeah.
one day kind of falling out of the car and not being able to get back in, not being able to get my phone. It was pouring with rain, and it really was a dreadful, dreadful time. If only women are forewarned and forearmed, which is obviously my passion now.
Yes. No, absolutely. My goodness me. So would you have said that it was a panic attack that you experienced, or was it more like heart palpitations? Because that's quite a common scenario as well.
No, I would definitely say it was anxiety and panic attacks. My sister's actually had quite a few heart palpitations where she's been blue lighted to hospital, but that's literally her one and only symptom. She always had really bad periods. I had a handful of tampons, really light periods, never had any gynae issues. And she says to me, I've kind of walked it till I remind her of a few more of the symptoms. And she said, yeah, I have been to the Royal Bucks a few times. So again, if we can get our medical world trained up on more, knowledge where it comes to menopause, I think we would save the country an awful lot of money and women an awful lot of time in their lives.
Absolutely. And yeah, no one wants to be suffering with chronic pain. That's life's not worth living. It really is. It's no quality of life there
And
at
you
all.
also don't want to just keep taking tablets when I really ever wanted to know was what was wrong with me. And my
Yeah.
light bulb moment was actually, it's quite amusing now. And he knows I talk about him quite a bit. You're supposed to have about 5 or 6 sessions of physio with the NHS. And after
Right.
a year, I'm still going. I've got 11 consultants all sending me back to this poor physio. And I'd worked particularly hard, and it was the 22nd of December, and I kind of went in to see him, and I'm holding on to the curtains, I'm holding on to glass sliding doors. I crawl on my hands and knees the last few cubicles to get to the end, as I did every week. And Dave said to me, oh, here it is, lift one, drag one. And I think after, this was probably about nearly year 8, and I think I just broke down. I just looked at him and I said, am I riddled with cancer? Because nobody knows what's wrong with me. And he was just sort of like, oh my goodness, can't cope with a crying woman. He was probably a couple of years older than me, span his laptop at me and said, look, all these women that I've got in today are all between the ages of 40 and 60, all have joint issues. Now, he never mentioned menopause, but he frog marched me with his arm round me, literally carrying me back to my GP's, and said, he made a massive scene. He said, I'm not treating this lady anymore. You need to check her hormones out. It's systemic every week. It's left elbow, left knee, right part of her neck this week. Next week, her neck will be fine, and she'll be crawling on her hands and knees because she can't weight bear through either of her hips.
Right.
I've never had a hot flush. I'm quite a cold morsel now, because I think a lot of women are led to believe that menopause is all about hot flushes. There's so many women that I speak to now in my line of work that say, oh, I've never had a hot flush. I'm always quite cold. So again, it's just being forewarned and forearmed that just because you're not having hot flushes doesn't mean to say you're not in perimenopause.
Absolutely. And we know that you can have cold flushes as well, right?
Yeah, I quite often after a hot flush, women can have a cold flush. So it must be awful. They must be kicking the sheets off if they're having night sweats, and then the next minute they're cold. And then obviously if you're drenched in sweat, these poor women, have had very little sleep all night, are then freezing cold, stripping beds in the middle of the night. It's terrible, terrible symptom to have.
Absolutely. So when this consultant then, really spoke to your GP and said, look, you need to do something, is that the point then where you finally got the help that you needed in terms of hormone replacement therapy?
Therapist, and obviously he'd worked in the medical world for many, many years, and my then GP wasn't particularly very knowledgeable, but there was another GP, funny enough, an army doctor, that was in the background listening to the commotion, and she said, I'll see this lady tomorrow. So she came out and said to me, could you write down as much as you could? And of course, I couldn't write very much because I could barely hold a pen. So I got my daughter to write what I thought it was okay to write. Then I added a few bits in as to mentally how I'd been feeling. And very quickly, she put me on some very strong anti-inflammatories, which for a very short time, I could actually extend my arm and give somebody a hot drink. I never would have carried a tray of drinks. I never would have, my friends knew if they came around, make your own tea, pick the kettle up yourself, carry your own drink. And that was just how life had become for me. So within probably about 6 months, we tried HRT. And for me, the estrogen was absolutely brilliant. I noticed within 2 or 3 weeks, I would say I was probably 30% better. But HRT isn't a miracle cure for lots of women. I am 16 months on. I'm under a menopause specialist. I'm very lucky down in Hampshire that the Mid Hampshire Health Trust have menopause doctors and nurses in the community. You have to wait a while to see them. But unfortunately, I've got this, they think I've got an intolerance to progesterone. So I'm now on my 4th different lot. I always say to my ladies and my followers, please give it time. Every time you change or tweak your HRT, you really need to give that another 3 months.
Yeah.
So I'm on my 4th lot and I'm still spotting and bleeding. And so we are back to the drawing board again, I think in about 2 weeks' time. And it is, I think women expect a miracle cure. Lifestyle, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you, Nikki, with your line of work, is massive. I say to a lot of women and a lot of the workplaces I go into with my menopause presentations, it's a lifestyle change. You've got to look, if you're drinking, if you're smoking, cut the cigarettes, cut down on the alcohol. It's no good saying I've always hit the gym, I've got a slim, washboard stomach. So did I. But, your cortisol levels, everything, your metabolism as we age anyway, it is trying to be in a calorie deficit, try and follow a bit of a Mediterranean diet. Some women like to fast. Unfortunately, it's like HRT, it's finding what works for you. You'll always find me in the gym 4 or 5 mornings a week. I think it's great for your mental health. For me, I can't function. My joints aren't brilliant without me continuing to exercise. So it is a lifestyle change.
Absolutely. And I think, alongside that, I mean, a lot of women turn to supplements, right?
Yeah.
I know you're quite quite into your supplements, Claire. So let's discuss that a little bit more. What supplements did you take then, and for what symptom?
Oh, I've got some funny stories, Nikki. I'm more than happy to share. A lot of women, I can see them if I'm doing online presentations, they're nodding.
Yeah.
So initially, I used a high street and I would beg people, do your homework, look into the quality of the supplements that you're using. There's some great companies out there, but you need to really do your research, because if you look at, for example, turmeric, a lot of companies, when you look at it, the percentage is 27%. Another really good reputable company will have like 91% turmeric in their turmeric, not use cheap fillers.
Yeah.
And things like that. So that would be my first advice: do your research. Secondly, I would say for me, I have found a real game changer. Gut health is massive in menopause. And for me, as a young woman, pre-periods, I always had IBS. That seemed to be rife for me back in menopause. We know that the gut is kind of second to your brain. So I swear by pre and probiotics. I used to breath fart from the top of the stairs. I could outfart any man all the way to the bottom with wind, no smell to it, but really awful stomach pain, awful stomach cramps. I kept food diaries. The only thing that really ever worked for me was taking pre and probiotics, and good quality ones. And that's been a game changer for me. It's helped with bloating, if you suffer with menopausal bloating. What else do I take? Vitamin D. If somebody put a gun to my head and said, right, one vitamin, what would you take? Vitamin D is really good for lots and lots of menopause symptoms. I've suddenly in the last year started to get really bad lower back pain. Never had a bad back in my life. Every other joint, but never my back. So I take a large quantity of vitamin D. But I would just add that if you're on any medication, you should really run supplements past your GP, just to make sure that it doesn't have any contraindications with any other medication that you're taking.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant advice, Claire. I actually take a pre and probiotic as well in liquid form. A company called Simprove. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I use Dr. Vegan. Very, very good. They're really into they're vegan friendly. You can, I love their sort of attitude where it comes to sort of the planet. Their motto is sort of better me, better planet. So, you know, you literally, all the gubbins, once you finish the little packet, it all goes in recycling. And they're sort of vegan free, gluten free, this free, that free. And it's the quality of their products that I really, really rave about.
Absolutely. So, Claire, I know you said obviously you're single mum, but how did menopause really then affect your relationships with even your daughters and your friends and so on?
Yeah, sadly, I would say I think my friends, because they weren't going through it, I think they struggled to really understand how badly I was suffering. My girls, my twins, Abby and Beth, have been an absolute, they've been my rocks over the years, because I think they saw me, you know, obviously if you're living with someone, you can see how much pain they're in, you can see how much somebody's suffering. You know, obviously, as I said to you earlier, they've helped me set my free menopause website up, clipboardclaire.com, which is there to help absolutely anybody we can. And the girls are really, they say to me, Mum, we shouldn't know this much about vaginal dryness at 22. They're 25 now, but you know, it's all about being forewarned and forearmed. And I don't want to see my daughters go through what I've gone through. Another thing a lot of people say is, oh, you know, my mum walked it. Well, my mum had the most horrendous hot flushes. I can always remember as quite a young kid, her being in the open refrigeration section of Waitrose and passing everybody their food and standing there feeling cold, thinking, can we hurry up? And she was always outside in a foot of snow, you know, literally in a pair of knickers, and that was it.
Yeah,
And yet she had quite a bad time. I've had a horrific time, and my sister has had a relatively easy time. So I don't think you can always gauge menopause by your family, you know, your previous family members. So I think you've got to, it is very, very individual. And I think that is the problem with getting it diagnosed and finding
yeah.
what works for you, whether it's weight gain or whatever your symptoms are.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just being a bit more in tune, isn't it, with your body and going, hang
Yeah.
on a minute, that doesn't feel quite right, or
Yeah.
that's different. And I think a lot of women they really benefit from like journaling as well. Like
Yeah.
even just being able to look back and just see, oh, yeah, that's been quite a common pattern, you know, it's not just down to coincidence.
Yeah. And definitely my advice would be always go into menopause. You know, if you're in your mid-30s now, be aware of it and start thinking, could I lose a few extra pounds? Could I do a bit more exercise? Could I cut out the cigarettes? You know, and for me that was quite cruel, because I was always I'm quite tall, I'm 5'10", always been quite slim, always gone to the gym, not smoked, didn't really drink bundles. But you know, I was really flawed with menopause. And I
Yeah.
think if you can, yeah, if you can go into it with open, you know, I always say to people, it's not a matter of us frightening people. It's a matter of being aware and educated about those symptoms and thinking, do you know what, that lady, I listened to that lady, and I don't feel myself. I don't feel very happy. I get ready to go out. I'm stood at the front door, and then I don't want to go out. I don't want to leave the place. And then you end up having a row with your partner or your friends that you're going out with. And you know, it can be a very lonely time. Davina McCall talks about, you know, being in a room full of people and
Yeah.
feeling incredibly, incredibly lonely.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the internal battles, isn't it, that
But
we're faced
often
with.
women are unaware that it is menopause or it's perimenopause beginning. And I think our mindset is trained for, we wait for a regular period, we wait for hot flushes. And I know women in their mid to late 50s who are still having regular periods, but they're having
Mm,
horrendous menopause symptoms as well.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, dismiss the fact it could be menopause just because they're still having a bleed, but you know, we know that that's perimenopause. So
Yeah. And it can
yeah.
be, I mean, I think I was in perimenopause, but, you know, it can go on for, they say 3 to 4 years. I was well into 10, 12 years.
Mm, yeah. Yeah,
Well, looking
absolutely.
back, hindsight is a wonderful thing. You look about the, you know, the mental health things, the anxiety, the not feeling very happy, you know, feeling quite downhearted, even though you're having a great life and a great time. Um, Often those symptoms will come before anything that makes you think, my hormones are playing up. Maybe I need to go and see my GP. So, I would just say to anybody, if you've got any symptoms, always write it all down. On my website, we've got free menopause website trackers. I think if you even keep a note of things like that, like your sleep pattern and your mood and your periods, but they're the biggest giveaway. And I think they're the worst giveaway because, like I say, some people are still having them and people don't think, I wonder if this could be hormone related.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's knowledge is power. So I think the more that we're aware of everything and write things down, the easier it'll become just to kind of recognise and be aware of what we're going through, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So where would you say you are now, Claire? I know you said that you're still trying to get the kind of progesterone dosage right for yourself, for your HRT, but would you say you're a much better place then now?
Absolutely. And I always like to leave things on a positive note and say to women that, I was always quite confident now going, but I think now I've just come back a more educated, informed. I've written a book. I've got a website. I've got a menopause group. I now go into the workplace with menopause presentations. I never would have stood up and spoken in front of people probably 3 or 4 years ago. I think you lose your confidence. I think brain fog, you forget what you're going to say. And I just think that, you do come out of this, you are post-menopause for life. I think there's a lot of misinformation where women think, oh, I'm through that. And I have ladies contact me in their 70s and 80s saying, I've all of a sudden started having hot flushes, never had a hot flush in my life, because those remaining depleting hormones every now and again will rear their ugly heads and throw you into another menopause symptom. But again, I think if you're forewarned and forearmed, I think you can deal with these things and change a few sort of tiny lifestyle changes can make all the difference. And I will get my HRT right. I'm absolutely sure, whatever route I decide to go down next. I definitely think you come back a bit happier and you think, blimey, I look back now and I think, where have those years gone? And I'm just passionate to make sure that no other woman, suffers, and men are informed and educated as well. I'm part of a campaign where we've now got education. If schools follow the RSE curriculum, I think it's England and Wales, all kids now are taught, boys and girls, from the age of 15, 16, on the back end of periods and sex education. And I think that's really important because you've suddenly got a testosterone-fueled son, a young daughter who's just started a period, dad who's spending all his time in the man shed, and mum that's just, losing the plot. So I think if everybody is educated and informed, we will talk about it. And it just makes so much more of a smoother time for women. And 51% of the population.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. No, that's really good that those initiatives have, set into schools and stuff. That's amazing. Was there any other advice, Claire, that you would give to women who are about to go through menopause or are currently going through it just now?
I would say be kind to yourself. It is a really hard time for 25% of us. 25% will have very few symptoms and 50% will be something in between. Go and see your GP. I know lots of people don't have an awful lot of luck with their doctor's surgery. My advice is always ask for whoever deals with menopause or women's health. And don't take no for an answer. Don't be fobbed off. If nobody, struggling should not be an option. You should be able to function and have a good quality of life. If, like me, you're not, you've got to keep going back or change your doctor's surgery. But I think the more awareness, the more campaigning we're all doing, I think the more we are definitely getting it heard. We're banging the drum. We're not going away anytime soon. And menopause isn't. So, and just go into menopause with a positive mindset, knowing that you're aware that tinnitus can be rife and vaginal dryness is another dreadful symptom that 83% of women suffer with. And I think less than 7% of women go and get help for. I watch ladies in the gym in the morning and they're like pulling themselves apart and they can't sit down. I'm like, go and get some localized estrogen. Which you insert vaginally twice a week. I will use it until the day I die. It's very good if you suffer with constant reoccurring UTIs.
Yes.
And again, it's just a subject that is a real taboo. Nobody wants to talk about it. So, I think we should make it the norm. A bit like periods now. We see them advertised on the television morning, noon and night. Menopause
Absolutely.
is getting there.
Yes. But I think, yeah, absolutely. I think with the work that we're both doing, hopefully we will all get it there sooner.
Absolutely, Nikki.
Absolutely. Well, amazing, Claire. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I will be sure to include your link to your website in the show notes so that anybody listening, if you want to go check out clipboardclaire.com, then you certainly can do by clicking the link in the show notes. And we shall speak again soon, Claire.
Brilliant, Nikki. Oh, you've been a fantastic host, and thank you for just supporting women. It's the women in the future that, I really worry about. I don't want to see them suffer like we have. Forewarned is forearmed. There's lots of positives to it, but you're doing an amazing job, Nikki, and thank you for spreading the awareness that you are.
Great. Thank you so much. And we'll
Lovely.
speak
Thank you for
soon.
having me on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Menopause Unplugged. I hope you found the conversation to be informative, enlightening, and empowering. Remember, menopause is a natural part of a woman's life journey, but it doesn't have to be a lonely one. Whether you're experiencing perimenopause or menopause, my menopause coaching program can provide reassurance and guidance. Please do reach out to me through my contact details on the show description. And until next time, take care.